Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Tolkien Road, episode 303. Greta, how we
Hey.
doing?
How we doing? Well, it's Monday.
Yeah,
Mondays aren't fun,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I don't know. Other than that,
yeah.
how are you?
Yeah, well, so you may not know this, but I did tell like all our patrons that the episode was delayed because we were supposed to do it Friday, but then had something totally just a huge bummer of walking into the house on Friday afternoon right before we were going to record, and our sweet little Boots the cat had unfortunately left this good earth. So rather suddenly. So it's just a bummer. It was just a bummer. It kind of smarted quite a bit as losing our sweet little pet's will. So.
I didn't know you had told everybody.
Well, I told the patrons, because I feel like I especially owe them, the
An
word.
explanation.
Yeah, an explanation.
Yeah. Well, if I'd known that, I wouldn't have put on a brave face. But
Yeah.
well, what's done is done.
Yeah, it's on one hand you read about how horrible things are with Gondolin, and it's like, well, at least
That's true.
at least things aren't as bad as that. But just something about our cute little furry friends. When we lose one of them, especially kind of suddenly like that, it's pretty tough. So
It is.
Yeah.
It definitely is. Yeah. It's
So been a little bit in mourning mode, but I think things are looking up for us. So feeling better about it. So
Good.
Yeah. All right. Well, in this episode, we will be discussing Chapter 23 of the Silmarillion, of Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin. Before we get started, we'd like to give a double up air five to our patrons. 3, 2, 1. Whoopsht. Boom. Nice.
Very nice.
Special thanks to this episode's executive producers, John R., Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien, Jacob Lockham, John H., and Scotchy Bobo.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all. Mm-hmm. And a shout out to our newest patrons, Mario G. and Ben D.
Oh, welcome, guys. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for becoming patrons. We really appreciate your support. Become a patron by visiting patreon.com/TolkienRoad. Your financial support helps the Tolkien Road to keep on evering on and lends you some cool perks along the way. Learn more at patreon.com/TolkienRoad. YouTube, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know what's on your mind in the comments below. And hey, you've got like 2 more days once you, if you watch this on the day it's released, you got about 2 more days to take advantage of a great deal over at truemisspress.com. Just use the code EP300 and you take 20% off of anything in our store from now until the end of August, which is like 2 days away at this point. So better act fast. Mm-hmm. You can still, you can always take 20% off if you're a patron. You get a special code as a patron that you can use to take 20% off at truemisspress.com. And actually right now, if you're a patron, you get 25% off just to bump it up a little bit for our patrons. So anyway, now's the time to act. All right. Let's dive on in to the Fall of Gondolin.
Let's do it.
So our quote of the week actually comes from 3 chapters ago, chapter 20. And this is appropriate for this chapter because it kind of foreshadows, sets the stage for what's going to happen in chapter 23. Here we go. The field was lost, but still Húrin and Huor and the remnant of the house of Haldor stood firm with Turgon of Gondolin, and the hosts of Morgoth could not yet win the Pass of Sirion. Then Húrin spoke to Turgon, saying, "Go now, Lord, while time is. For in you lives the last hope of the Eldar, and while Gondolin stands, Morgoth shall still know fear in his heart." But Turgon answered, Not long now can Gondolin be hidden, and being discovered it must fall." Then Huor spoke and said, "Yet if it stands but a little while, then out of your house shall come the hope of elves and men. This I say to you, Lord, with the eyes of death. Though we part here forever, and I shall not look on your white walls again, from you and from me a new star shall arise. Farewell." So, kind of sets, tells us in like a little nutshell what's actually going to take place in this chapter. So, I thought that was an appropriate quote for this.
Agreed. Yeah,
especially this, a new star shall arise, right? This is the kind of key for the rest the remainder of the Silmarillion, which after this chapter, just one more chapter to go. And then we will be covering a Calabaith, and we will be covering of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, because those are part of this book, the Silmarillion. We'll probably just do each of those in one chapter, even though they're a little longer. In the past, we've spent more time on those. When we did the Silmarillion the first time, we spent more time on those. This time, I think we're just going to do that like nice summary of each of those particular chapters.
So just one episode.
Yeah, just one episode each. Okay. So yeah, that's the plan.
Sounds good.
All right. So with Nargothrond and Doriath both having fallen and the Sons of Fëanor reduced to wretchedness, only Gondolin remains of the great Elven realms. But how long will Gondolin remain hidden? And if it is discovered, can it withstand the onslaught of Angband's fury? Special note, this story, The Fall of Gondolin, is in all likelihood the first tale of Middle-earth. It's a little fuzzy. Sometimes it seems maybe Beren and Luthien was, but they were probably written roughly around the same time originally, the first versions of them, meaning during World War I, like late in the World War I period. But, Tolkien at different times called this the very first story. He also mentioned that Beren and Luthien was the seed of Middle-earth, but it would seem that this one probably just barely predates Beren and Luthien. So... But it's also, the funny thing about that is he'd never quite really completed this story either to his liking. So we will at some point cover the book, The Fall of Gondolin, which is the last of the Great Tales books. These, so Christopher, his kind of last major publications of his father's work were The Children of Húrin, Beren and Luthien, and The Fall of Gondolin. He published a book length on each one. The Fall of Gondolin is more like the Beren and Luthien book, where it's a collection of different writings that are kind of shows the evolution of the tale itself. So we'll get to that at some point. First up will be most likely The Children of Húrin, because that's an actual like novel length story that just is the story. So looking forward to doing that. But a lot more to say about this story outside of just of the Fall of Gondolin, outside of just this particular chapter here. All right. So, hey, disclaimer, you should read this story before you listen to the episode. If you can. If you need the episode, that's cool, but we always favor giving it a read so that you can do your best to understand it before you dive into our discussion of it. We won't be covering every single detail, but we're going to hit the high points, and if there's anything else y'all want to talk about, let us know in the comments. All right, so this takes place timeline the years 472 through 524, 472 being the year that Tuor is born, and 524 being the year that Tuor and Idril sail into the west, depart for the west. You can see the Tale of Years and the War of the Jewels for more info on the timeline. All right, so Tuor, as we probably realize by now, is the son of Huor, brother of Húrin. Huor is slain in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. So going back to that last thing, brother of Húrin, which means he is the cousin of Turin, right? So Tuor and Turin are cousins, and Huor and Húrin are brothers. So Huor is slain in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, and Tuor is raised by elves in Mithrim, right, which is one of those regions in the northwest of Beleriand on the map. Tuor is enslaved by Easterlings at the age of 16 and eventually escapes into the wilderness. He lives in the wilderness for several years, and until he is inspired by Ulmo to wander toward the sea, right? Wander westward towards the sea. He eventually makes his way to Vinyamar, the abandoned city built by Turgon upon the shore of the Great Sea. And of course, Turgon is the king of Gondolin, the one who built Gondolin. He was inspired by Ulmo to go further inland and to find this hidden place and to build this great city of Gondolin there. But the first thing he had built was Vinyamar, which is the really first great city of the Noldor. And when he is near the sea, he meets Ulmo. So let's read a little bit about his meeting with Ulmo. So that can you start here, right here in the orange passage there, Greta?
Thus he came at length to the deserted halls of Vinyamar beneath Mount Taras, and he entered in, and found there the shield and the hauberk, and the sword and helm that Turgon had left there by the command of Ulmo long before. And he arrayed himself in those arms and went down to the shore. But there came a great storm out of the west, and out of that storm Ulmo, the Lord of Waters, arose in majesty and spoke to Tuor as he stood beside the sea. And Ulmo bade him depart from that place and seek out the hidden kingdom of Gondolin. And he gave Tuor a great cloak to mantle him in shadow from the eyes of his enemies.
Yeah, so what we're going to find in this chapter is that Ulmo plays a very major part. He seems to be in the background, and from the very beginning, right? Ulmo has been, it would seem, the Valar who just does not want to abandon the Noldor and the elves of these eastern lands, right? Of the lands beyond the sea, from the perspective of Valinor. So Ulmo, it's like all this time he's been preparing for this contingency. He sees all these things ahead of time. And, I just find it really interesting that Ulmo, of all people, because you think of the sea as kind of being like, I don't know, like a lot of the lore about the sea just in general in our world is that it's like kind of a cruel place and it doesn't care and all these things. But Ulmo seems to be the one that cares most about the peoples, like, the kind of these poor peoples of Middle Earth, right?
Yeah. This is not the first time that he's intervened.
By no means.
Yeah.
By no means.
Yeah.
So next, as Tuor is here in this area, he also stumbles upon this figure of Voronwë, and it turns out Voronwë is one of the mariners who had set sail into the west many years before, and he finds him here. He finds him here shipwrecked, seemingly one of the only survivors, if not the only survivor of that expedition. So I'll read this passage. But in the morning when the storm was past, Tuor came upon an elf standing beside the walls of Venyamar, and he was Voronwë, son of Eärendil of Gondolin, who sailed in the last ship that Turgon sent into the west. But when that ship returning at last out of the deep ocean foundered in the great storm within sight of the coasts of Middle-earth, Ulmo took him up, alone of all its mariners, and cast him onto the land near Venyamar. And learning of the command laid upon Tuor by the Lord of Waters, Voronwë was filled with wonder, and did not refuse him his guidance to the hidden door of Gondolin. Therefore they set out together from that place, and as the fell winter of that year came down upon them out of the north, they went warily eastward under the eaves of the mountains of shadow. So he and Voronwë go and journey and begin to journey eastward and to seek back towards Gondolin. Of course, Voronwë is from Gondolin, so as we learned right here. We also get this interesting little passage about this figure clad in black, a tall man clad in black that they pass by, and he's never actually identified in this passage. But Greta, do you know who this happens to be? Any guesses?
I only know because he wrote it in the margin of the copy I read.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's Turin, right?
Turin, yeah.
So this is in fact Turin, and it's just this little something that that Tolkien decided to put in there. They kind of cross paths right here, right? And if you remember, like, the story of Turin is essentially kind of taking place concurrently with this story of Tuor, because we get later on in this chapter and we hear about like the destruction of Nargothrond, and we hear about the destruction of Doriath, right? And so all these things are taking place concurrently as we're being set up for the fall of Gondolin as well. But yes, this is Turin, who it says, as he gazed upon, they saw one going northward in haste, and he was a tall man clad in black and bearing a black sword. But they knew not who he was, nor anything of what had befallen in the south, and he passed them by, and they said no word. So, and it just, you think about it, it's like, man, that would be weird if Tuor ever found out that was in fact his cousin Turin, right? Of course, not that would mean anything to him, because he never would have known Turin. Tuor was never even knew his father, Huor, right? And his mother really died, I think, probably before Tuor even knew Rian, right, his mother, because she I believe she died of grief when she went to see the burial mound where Huor and so many others were buried. So anyway, Tuor probably wouldn't have had a great sense of his family lineage, and why would he have thought like this random guy anyway was his cousin, even if he knew he had a cousin named Turin?
Yeah.
So just kind of a little chance meeting of fate, and it's just interesting that this one doesn't really seem to have much significance other than just like, hey, I mean, that's like the most Turin thing that could happen is like, here's this guy who's like, one of his last remaining relatives in the world, and
they just pass each other by.
It's like, actually, it's probably kind of lucky for Tuor that they didn't stop to talk, because if they had stopped to talk to Turin, it probably would have meant like their deaths right there or something like that. Not because of Turin killing them,
but because Turin
but just because Turin seemed to bring all of the bad luck with him wherever he went. All right. So arriving in Gondolin, so they arrive in Gondolin and they have this message to deliver to Ulmo, or I'm sorry, from Ulmo to Turgon. So Greta, do you want to read this passage right here?
Sure. Then Tuor stood before Turgon, son of Fingolfin, high king of the Noldor, and upon the king's right hand there stood Maeglin, his sister's son. But upon his left hand sat Idril Celebrimbor, his daughter. And all that heard the voice of Tuor marveled, doubting that this were in truth a man of mortal race. For his words were the words of the Lord of Waters, that came to him in that hour. And he gave warning to Turgon, that the curse of Mondos now hastened to its fulfillment, when all the works of the Noldor should perish. And he bade him depart, and abandon the fair and mighty city that he had built, and go down Sirion to the sea. Then Turgon pondered long the counsel of Ulmo, and there came into his mind the words that were spoken to him in Vinyamar. Love not too well the work of thy hands, and the devices of thy heart, and remember that the true hope of the Noldor lieth in the west, and cometh from the sea. But Turgon was become proud, and Gondolin as beautiful as a memory of Elven Tirion, and he turned, and he trusted still in its secret and impregnable strength, though even a Vala should gainsay it. And after the Nimit,
you got this.
Near
Arnoidiad.
The people of that city desired never again to mingle in the woes of elves and men without, nor to return through dread and danger into the west.
Yeah, so Ulmo tells Turgon, hey, it's time to get out of here and head south to the down to the mouths of Sirion. And of course, in typical Noldoran fashion, what does Turgon decide?
He's like, bruh.
I'm cool.
Nah.
We're cool here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like he told you to build this city in the first place, so you might want to listen to him when he tells you it's time to abandon it, right?
Yeah.
But, I just think that seems to be this recurring thing. I believe we talked about that last episode with Thingol, and it's like, listen, like you might want to listen to your Maya wife, right? When she's giving you counsel concerning the Silmaril and the Nalgrim, right? Or the what was it? The necklace. Was it the Nalgrim?
Oh, the Nauglamir.
Nauglamir, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to listen. And I believe Ulmo has this, what was it? I think something similar to this happened with Ulmo as well before, where he tried to give advice to somebody and they kind of, just snubbed him. And it's like, you might want to listen to the Valar who's trying to tell you something, right? But Turgon doesn't, and you might imagine what happens. But before that happens, we do get a nice little happy note, and that's that Tuor meets Idril, the daughter of Turgon, and they get married, much to Maeglin's chagrin, right? Remember old Maeglin from several chapters ago, right? The son of Eärendil. And so let's read a little bit about what happens here. And Tuor remained in Gondolin, for its bliss and its beauty and the wisdom of its people held him enthralled, and he became mighty in stature and in mind, and learned deeply of the lore of the exiled elves. Then the heart of Idril was turned to him, and his to her. And Maeglin's secret hatred grew ever greater, for he desired above all things to possess her, the only heir of the king of Gondolin. But so high did Tuor stand in the favor of the king, that when he had dwelt there for 7 years, Turgon did not refuse him even the hand of his daughter. For though he would not heed the bidding of Ulmo, he perceived that the fate of the Noldor was wound with the one whom Ulmo had sent. And he did not forget the words that Huor spoke to him before the host of Gondolin departed from the battle of unnumbered tears. Then there was made a great and joyful feast, for Tuor had won the hearts of all the people, save only of Maeglin and his secret following. And thus there came to pass the second union of elves and men. And so in the year 503, Eärendil is born, Eärendil the half-elven, from the marriage of Tuor and Idril.
So this was what Huor was talking about.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, this was the prophecy.
Yep.
Yeah. Yet if it stands but a little while, then out of your house shall come the hope of elves and men. This I say to you, Lord, with the eyes of death, though we part here forever, and I shall not look on your white walls again. From you and from me a new star shall arise. Yep. Yeah. So, what we learn next is that Maeglin is on a mining expedition in the mountains, and Maeglin is a bad boy, and he goes too far. He goes too far beyond where they're permitted to go, right? Because Turgon, in an effort to keep Gondolin hidden, wants, he's very specific about how far the people of Gondolin can go, because he doesn't want people to wander too far, get captured, and then put the secret location of Gondolin at risk.
So you think this was intentional on Maeglin's
I don't think it was intentional,
part.
Actually.
So he wasn't really a bad boy.
Well, he was being bad because he was violating the boundaries that Turgon had set down.
No, that's what I'm asking. Was it that he knew what he was doing? His breaking of the boundary was intentional, or did he just like?
Well, his breaking of the boundary was intentional, but
Yeah.
I don't think it was like. I don't think he was looking to get caught by Morgoth, right?
Oh, okay. That's what I meant. I mean, was he aware of the fact that he was breaking that boundary? Because when I read it, it seemed to me like he had just kind of,
Here's what
like
it says.
Unknowingly wandered too far.
For he has been told, loved mining and quarrying after metals above all other craft, and he was master and leader of the elves who worked in the mountains distant from the city, seeking after metals for their smithying of things both of peace and war. But often Maeglin went with few of his folk beyond the leaguer of the hills, and the king knew not that his bidding was defied. And thus it came to pass, as fate willed, that Maeglin was taken prisoner by orcs and brought to Angband.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe it's not entirely clear, but I don't get the impression from that. To me, this is just like, it's kind of like, you're pushing your boundaries.
Yeah.
You're like, what does it matter if we go a little further? Like Turgon doesn't know. We've been here plenty of times. It's perfectly safe, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of a classic story, right? Like you push the boundary, keep pushing the boundary, and eventually you're gonna get caught. Something bad's gonna happen.
Right.
So
yeah, like you said, he didn't do it with the intention of exposing Gondolin.
Right. Yeah. But at the same time, it goes on to say, it basically says like he wasn't a weakling or craven, but the torment he endured was pretty bad, and it also didn't hurt that he really hated Tuor and was mad, and Morgoth basically promised to Maeglin that he would give him Idril, right?
Yeah.
So that didn't hurt, right? to help encourage Maeglin to expose Gondolin's secret location.
Yep.
So Gondolin's secret location is exposed, and then in the year 510, when Eärendil was 7 years old, Morgoth launches his assault. It says he loosed upon Gondolin his Balrogs and his orcs and his wolves, and with them came dragons of the brood of Glaurung, and they were become now many and terrible. The host of Morgoth came over the northern hills, where the height was greatest, and the watch least vigilant. And it came at night upon a time of festival, when all the people of Gondolin were upon the walls to await the rising sun, and sing their songs at its uplifting. For the morrow was the great feast that they named the Gates of Summer. But the red light mounted the hills in the north and not in the east. and there was no stay in the advance of the foe until they were beneath the very walls of Gondolin, and the city was beleaguered without hope. So here, to me, this is classic Morgoth right here, right? He's coming at the time of festival, right?
No doubt.
Think about it. You go all the way back to chapter 1, and it's when at time of festival that he destroys the 2 lamps, right? You go to the darkening of Valinor, and it's time of festival that he destroys the 2 trees, right? And
so the guy doesn't like parties. You don't really like parties either.
It's a total party pooper. Yeah. Yeah.
Just saying, don't hold it against him.
Well,
not everybody loves parties.
Well, I may not be a fan of big parties, but I don't go like slaughtering people at the parties.
That's good. That is good.
At least not yet.
Yeah.
Gosh, that sounded horrible. Now that's gonna happen at an actual party I'm at, and I'm gonna get like it's gonna be like posted like he did it, you know. Gosh.
Yeah. Sorry, I opened the door. I was just trying to be silly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I actually I like parties. I'm just like, you know, I'm not like parties can get old pretty quick for me too. So, but I'm not like Morgoth. I'm not gonna go and slaughter people. I'll just walk off by myself and, you know.
Here's the thing.
Do my own thing.
Here's the thing. If they just invited Morgoth to their party, none of this would have happened.
Yeah, I think he was invited to a lot of parties when he was in Valinor, and then he still did this. So,
well,
yeah.
You never know.
But you're really sticking up for Morgoth here. I don't, you know.
Somebody's got to. Guy gets a bad rap.
Okay. Yes.
Maybe I'm enjoying playing Morgoth's advocate.
Morgoth's advocate.
Just to, you know, I don't know. He's had a rough life. Anyway, moving on.
Okay. All right. So,
not that I'm condoning his actions.
Morgoth has a pattern, and you know, you think by this point they'd learn like, okay, we're having a party. Maybe we should like make sure plenty of people are still around.
Set up some guards or something.
To set up some guards here.
Yeah.
Anyway,
because history repeats itself.
That's right. So basically, this is a pretty incredible battle. You know, we kind of got a little taste of all of the foes, all of the forces that Morgoth sends against Gondolin. Such a huge, huge group that it almost looks like the sun is rising, you know, in the north, right? So in the midst of this, you know, we get a lot of different accounts of different little skirmishes that happen between different folks. Highlight a couple. The first is Maeglin and Tuor. So Greta, do you want to read this passage?
Tuor sought to rescue Idril from the sack of the city, but Maeglin had laid hands on her and on Eärendil. And Tuor fought with Maeglin on the walls and cast him far out, and his body as it fell smote the rocky slopes of Amon Gwareth. Thrice ere it pitched into the flames below. Then Tuor and Idril led the remnants of the people of Gondolin as they could gather in the confusion of the burning down the secret way which Idril had prepared. And of that passage the captains of Angband knew nothing, and thought not that any fugitives would take a path towards the north and the highest parts of the mountains and the nighest to Angband. The fume of the burning, and the steam of the fair fountains of Gondolin withering in the flame of the dragons of the north, fell upon the vale of Tumladen in mournful mists. And thus was the escape of Tuor and his company aided, for there was still a long and open road to follow from the tunnel's mouth to the foothills of the mountains. Nonetheless, they came thither, and beyond hope they climbed in woe and misery, for the high places were cold and terrible, and they had among them many that were wounded, and women and children. We didn't talk about this, but Idril had the foresight to prepare a secret escape.
That's right. And they take this secret escape. So Tuor kills Maeglin in defending Idril, and Idril and Tuor escape south with Eärendil and a host of whoever survives from Gondolin. So they go through this pretty dreadful pass, the Eagle's Cleft, where beneath the shadow of the highest peaks a narrow path wound its way. And there's this other great battle between Glorfindel and a Balrog, right? Many of the songs that have been sung of the duel of Glorfindel with the Balrog upon a pinnacle of rock in that high place, and both fell to ruin in the abyss. But the eagles coming stooped upon the orcs and drove them shrieking back, and all were slain or cast into the deeps, so that rumor of the escape from Gondolin came not until long after to Morgoth's ears. Then Thorondor bore up Glorfindel's body out of the abyss, and they buried him in a mound of stones beside the pass. And a green turf came there, and yellow flowers bloomed upon it amid the barrenness of stone until the world was changed. So, this company makes its way, continues south, going very far south, all the way to the Vale of Sirion, not far from the mouth of Sirion, and we learn that Tuor makes a song for Eärendil concerning Ulmo, and the sea longing awakens in both of them. Mm-hmm. And then we also learn that Gil-galad is made the High King of the Noldor. Now it says here that Gil-galad is the son of Fingon, right? However, Gil-galad has really interesting parentage. Basically, Tolkien couldn't decide whose son he actually was over time. And the last thing I think Tolkien said on the matter was he was probably the son of Orodreth, who was a child of Finarfin, I believe. Yes, that's right. Orodreth was in the last analysis, I believe, was the son of Angrad. So he was actually a grandson of Finarfin. So it gets really confusing with all these things. But here at least, Gil-galad, it's nice and clean. He's the son of Fingon. Okay, so there you go. All right. Yeah, so Tuor, and the last thing we learn of in this chapter, before we get to the last thing, we have this really interesting passage about Morgoth and his, believing his triumph was fulfilled, right? So he's brought about the destruction of Nargothrond, he's brought about the destruction of Doriath. The Sons of Fëanor are, just kind of a scattered little band now. 3 of them are dead. And now Gondolin is gone. So Morgoth is feeling pretty good about, this whole, I am the Lord of Arda, right? This whole idea that he is triumphant over all of these. And he's probably thinking to himself, all right, now, next up, I'm going, to the east, and I'm going to conquer the rest of these lands and all these peoples. And he's feeling pretty good about the odds for himself, because the Noldor and these elves of Beleriand were probably the best hope for resisting Morgoth at this point. And you look at it and it's like all he had to do. It's like he had these great forces, but really it was about his ability to sow discord amongst all these different peoples, amongst all these different brethren, all these different groups of people that really should be trusting each other and having love for one another. And he's able to sow discord and to manipulate people, knowing what they want, knowing who they're envious of, knowing who they despise. So we see deeper down these spiritual issues that Morgoth is kind of, the master of. All right. So we also read of Ulmo pleading with the Valar, right, to send help, but Manwë basically says, the wise have said that the hour was not yet come, that the only one speaking in person for the cause of both elves and men, pleading for pardon on their misdeeds and pity on their woes, might move the councils of the powers. So really someone has to come and plead on their behalves, right? Someone has to come all the way back to Valinor and plead on their behalves. And we learn lastly that Tuor, finding old age coming upon him, sails into the west with Idril and is joined to the Noldor, right? He's joined to the Noldor forever. So he, forsakes his status as a man, as a mortal man, and is numbered now among the elder race, it says. So, Greta, anything I skipped over that you think was noteworthy?
No, I think that's good.
All right.
Good job.
Yeah, well, one chapter to go, right? One chapter to go. Once again, Morgoth triumphs not so much by strength of arms, but by the sowing of division and envy. He didn't regret losing a Silmaril. It was a small price to pay to wreak vengeance upon his Noldoran foes. And, you just get this sense of the long defeat, right? That this has just been part of this idea that what Tolkien called the long defeat, that, you can only hold out against this kind of like creeping evil for so long, right? The creeping, the creeping doom for so long. But as we'll see in chapter 24, it's not the final word on all of this, right? There's one more major thing to happen in the story of the First Age, and it's a good one. So,
quick question.
Yeah.
When it says at the end that Tuor was like, he basically was sundered from men, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he was joined with the Noldor. That means that his fate also was to like be immortal then.
Yes, I believe so.
But that wasn't the case with Beren.
No, Luthien made a choice to become mortal like Beren, right?
Okay.
Because Beren at that point was already dead, right? So Beren died.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
And then Luthien pled for him.
Gotcha.
And brought him back to life, but she had to forsake her own immortality.
Right. Okay. So when it said that Idril and Tuor was the second time that men and elves had joined, Beren and Luthien was the first. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Cool.
Yeah. So, all right, let's do some haiku.
Let's do it.
All right. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Darn it.
I'll go first.
All right.
Let me see here. I had trouble writing one for this chapter, but here we go. Council unheeded. A kingdom falls. Tuor sails west. The oath remains.
Not bad. Yeah.
It's the best I could do.
All right. I liked it. It's good.
Kind of a summary haiku.
Summary in the
we
sense
should have just read
like
my
summertime.
haiku and been like, that's the chapter. Done.
Shortest episode ever.
Let's hear yours.
All right. Ulmo calls, summons unconquered hearts to the shore. Fix eyes on sunset.
I like that. Very good.
Thanks.
Yeah, better than mine.
It'll do.
That's for sure.
Didn't really summarize things like yours did.
That's true. It had more of a artistic bent to it, though.
Very artsy.
Mine was just the facts.
Yeah.
You had some like creative.
You're like, ain't got time for any of this, mumbo jumbo. Let me just get straight to the point here.
Straight to the point is what happens.
I'm like, la-ti-da, toss flowers in the air. That's my haiku. Yes.
We should all do a little bit more flower tossing.
I mean,
life would be so much better.
I'd do it every day. That's my
too.
main hobby is I just toss
flowers.
Just toss flower petals into the air. Yeah. All right. Well, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes or the platform of your choice. If you're a 5-star fan of the Tolkien Road, you can really help us out by heading over to iTunes or your preferred source for the show and dropping us a rating and review. When you do that, it helps to get the word out about the Tolkien Road, which helps us to keep on evering on. And drop us a line. You can correspond with us in a number of ways. Check out the show notes to learn more. And yeah, I think that's about it for this episode.
I think that's a wrap.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you to our amazing patrons, especially the following: John R.,
Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien,
Jacob Lockham,
John H.,
Scotchy Bobo,
Ms. Anonymous,
Andrew T.,
Red Hawk,
Shannon S.,
Brian O.,
Emilio P.,
Zeke F.,
James A.,
James L.,
Chris L.,
Chuck F.,
Azia V.,
Ish of the Hammer,
Teresa C.,
David of Pints with Jack,
Jonathan D.,
Eric B.,
Johanna T.,
Mike M.,
Robert H.,
Paul D.,
Julia,
Weirty,
Matthew W.,
Joe Bagelman,
Chris K.,
Jacob S.,
Don J.,
Richard K.,
Matt R.,
and Garrett P.
and Mario G.
Nice.
Yes. As well as those celebrating their Patreon anniversary this month, August of 2022, Jonathan L.,
Henry B.,
Austin B.,
and Caitlin H.
All right. Thank you all so much for your support.
Thanks, guys.
Always appreciate you guys. And thanks to everybody for listening. We'll talk at you next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.